in our region. The polls are staying open for another 24 minutes. So we won't see results from those ridings right away, but we will start to see the numbers very soon in about 100 ridings across the province. There are 124. There are 63 seats needed for a majority, and we'll find out tonight whether Doug Ford gets a second term. Joining me for our coverage on Rogers TV are Jennifer Stewart, the CEO of Syntax Strategic, and Caitlin Keeley, the CEO of M-Dash. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. Happy to be here.
Great to have you both here. And Caitlin, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on what this election was actually about? It appears very likely that Doug Ford will win another majority. It was not an election that received a lot of attention, I don't think. There weren't a lot of big swings or changes over the course of the election. So what was it about ultimately?
I don't know that it was much of anything. It feels like a bit of a ho-hum election that people are too busy with other things to have paid attention to. I think we're going to see real low voter turnout tonight. And I think that it's a lot of more of the same. It feels a little reminiscent of the last time we were here talking about the federal election, where we basically just saw the same thing repeated. So, I mean, there are a few things to watch tonight, see how the NDP do, see how the Liberals do. Obviously, Horwath and Del Duca's futures kind of rest on what happens this evening, but again, I think people are worried about other things, and this election has not captured hearts and minds.
And what do you think that's about, Jennifer? I always point to the fact that there's a bit of a rule in Canadian politics that unless something unusual happens, a government's going to get a second term. That seems to be what happens in Ontario. It seems to be what happens federally. So it takes something big for that not to happen. Is this just the typical pattern playing out? Is there something else going on?
No, I think you're right. I think it's complacency. I think we're 2 years into COVID and the pandemic. I think people are generally okay with how Doug Ford handled the pandemic, and they're not looking for change. Look, at the top of the mind of Ontarians is affordability. There was a poll released that most Ontarians want Ford to manage the economy going forward. He hasn't been divisive, like we've seen from some of the leadership candidates federally in the Conservative Party, and he's kind of towed the party line. So I think people are tired. I think people are fatigued by politics right now, and they just want to carry on, and that's what we're going to see tonight.
And there's another pattern that would be playing out if Doug Ford remains Premier after this election is over, which is typically when there's a Liberal government on Parliament Hill, there's a Conservative government at Queen's Park, and when there's a Conservative government in Ottawa, there's a Liberal government provincially. That has certainly been the pattern since really Confederation in this country. So, Caitlin, what about Doug Ford? There have been criticisms of his performance, especially early during the pandemic, but I think the polls seem to indicate that people, by the end of the pandemic, or this point in the pandemic, it's still continuing, but more recently there seems to be a sense that his government kind of picked up steam a little bit and started doing the things it needed to do, and that Doug Ford is not as conservative as Jennifer just pointed out, as some of the federal Conservative leaders or leadership candidates that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a more milquetoast conservatism that's happening, but I think it'll be interesting to see if he can hold all of the seats or if he makes any gains. I think that's really what people are going to be watching for. As you said earlier, most people get 2 terms. I'm disappointed that people aren't more passionate about politics right now. I feel like in the divisive world that we live in, where the left and right are sort of fighting more strongly, it would be nice to see people get engaged and actually participate. And it would be nice for things to change, and I don't think we're going to see that tonight.
So, Jen, what about Doug Ford? What are your thoughts? Because he's, I think for some people, he's polarizing, but for a lot of people, it seems, he has this sort of friendly demeanor about him. He rolls up his sleeves. He shows up when, there are shots of him helping dig somebody out of a snowbank and showing up with bottles of water at various events. There's kind of a folksy charm to some people in Ontario, and that seems to have worked for him.
I think it's completely worked for him. Look, he's got a shovel in the back of his F-150. He's ready to roll up his sleeves, as you noted. I think whoever is advising Ford played it strategically very well. Look, he was completely quiet during the trucking convoy, which was smart for him to be quiet. And this isn't coming from a partisan perspective. It's a strategic communications perspective. He released $10 daycare right before the election, so he was able to take the PR value of that announcement into this election. He is extremely friendly with Chrystia Freeland, and as you noted, people like having different parties in government, federally and provincially, so they have a sense that there's not too much collusion, that they've got choice, that people are looking at policies from different perspectives, and they feel good about that. And for the last 2 months, the party kind of kept him on the back burner, right? Like, let's not give him too much exposure. The polls are good; they're getting progressively better, and let's let the others make the mistakes for him. So I think this is, like you said, it's his to lose, Mark. And from a communications perspective, it's well balanced in terms of how he played his cards with the federal Liberals, how he navigated the trucking convoy in Ottawa, and also how he told his staff not to engage in this election, which I think is critically important, because there's been kind of a pact between the Liberals federally and the Conservatives provincially, whereby they don't really touch each other. And I think that has helped him in this election.
You're starting to see some of the results on your screen as we speak. At the bottom, you're going to see the province-wide numbers. Right now, the NDP leading or elected in 3 ridings, the Progressive Conservatives in 2, and none others reporting results. So there's only 5 ridings reporting results at the moment across Ontario. At least one of those is in our region. We're going to be showing you the results from Eastern Ontario on the left of your screen throughout the evening. And we have some early results in Ottawa Centre showing Joel Harden, the NDP incumbent, leading in that riding. That's an interesting one that we'll be watching. It's been Liberal before, of course. Joel Harden defeated Yasser Naqvi in the last election. We'll also watch Ottawa West Nepean, which was decided by 175 votes in a very close 3-way race in 2018. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. As the results continue to come in, Caitlin, let's talk about the relationship between Doug Ford and the Justin Trudeau government federally, because Jennifer just touched on that, and there is kind of a working relationship there. Doug Ford and Chrystia Freeland, sort of have this kind of funny friendship, and the Prime Minister even showed up at that announcement about daycare the day before Doug Ford made this election official. We always knew the election was going to happen on this day. It's a fixed election date, but there is the sort of formality of starting the campaign. And the day before the campaign started, the federal Liberal Prime Minister of Canada was with the provincial Progressive Conservative Premier making a daycare announcement. And I think there had to be some calculation on the part of both parties about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a win for both of them. I think, Ontario not having signed on to childcare for a long time was a thorn in the side of the Trudeau government. And obviously it was an extremely strategic move from the Ontario Conservatives to hold off until a perfect time, so that they are rolling into this election with $10 a day daycare, which makes a huge difference for parents. That change is, going to be felt in the pocketbooks, which is obviously something that everyone talks about, especially with the economic downturn that we're facing. People are struggling, so that childcare move worked for both Liberals and Conservatives, both federally and provincially.
Yeah. And you wonder what Stephen Del Duca was thinking when he woke up that day and saw Justin Trudeau at an announcement, not a campaign stop, but at an announcement the day before the campaign stops were going to start happening. That must have been an interesting reaction for Stephen Del Duca privately. So, Jen, let's talk about the opposition parties. And Stephen Del Duca is the leader of the Liberals. They came into this election having been almost wiped out across the province in the last election. They had only 7 seats. 4 of those, interestingly, more than half are in Eastern Ontario. So this is a bit of a stronghold for the party. But did Stephen Del Duca do enough in this campaign to pick up some seats? Did he do enough to win his own seat, which he lost in 2018? And did he do enough to keep his job?
I think the answer is no, no, and no. There was no friction in this election from the Liberal Party or created by the Liberal Party, which kind of provides that smooth pathway to victory for Ford. I think Del Duca is very much associated in the eyes of Ontarians with Kathleen Wynne, and I think that's probably negative for him, regardless of the efforts that he makes. So I don't think that this is the time that the Liberals rebuild themselves. I think give Doug Ford another 4 years under a majority. People will be more disgruntled, and that's just the pathway of politics as he continues to govern and our economy reopens, and really invest in a leader that has a brand, but a brand that is not associated with the past of the Liberal Party. They're coming in, they have some brand recognition, they're able to demonstrate leadership, and they're able to rebuild the party over the next 4 years. And I think that's really the pathway for the Liberals. It's certainly not in 2022, Mark.
Yeah. What do you think, Caitlin? What about Stephen Del Duca?
I mean, I think the writing's already on the wall that if he doesn't do well, they're likely going to be flipping leaders after this evening. I agree with Jennifer. I think this was a pretty snoozer of an election. You know, both the NDP and the Liberals had a chance to really hold Doug Ford to account, and I don't think they really were successful in that. And that, you know, that's part of why people aren't engaged in this election, is because, you know, the two opposition parties spent so much time picking on each other and fighting with each other instead of turning their sights on the Conservatives. I think probably in the hopes to be the official opposition, but it seems a bit like you lose your path if you're not focused on winning the seats in the ridings.
Yeah. And Caitlin, who do you think finishes this election with more seats, the Liberals or the NDP?
I think it's going to be, I mean, if we believe polling, I think NDP is slightly ahead, but again, I think, you know, it's still sort of up in the air. I think voter turnout, as always, is going to really, who's hitting the ground and pulling the vote and getting people out to vote. We know that, you know, folks that were older tend to be the ones that go out and vote, and they tend to vote Conservative. So again, I think it's sort of, there's a bit of a question mark for me anyways.
Yeah. Jennifer, what do you think? Who's going to be the official opposition if Doug Ford wins another government?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the NDP, which is going to be the Conservative dream, right? Because they can just have the landslide for the next 4 years. And again, just speaking of Doug Ford more strategically, not to associate himself with vaccine or opposing vaccine mandates like some other Conservative leaders have done was extremely smart, because he's really seen as kind of a middle line Conservative. He's that, oh golly gee Conservative that's out shaking hands, returning phone calls in the evening to his constituents as he's known to do, you know, shoveling out trucks during the snowstorm. And that's played well because there's a sense of kind of safety with him and not polarization that we've seen with other politicians. He's not absorbing that south of the border socialist approach that we've seen, which I think was very smart. And I think we're going to see him being a lot more aggressive in the next mandate of this government. I think he's also somebody, depending on what happens federally, that will have his eyes on Ottawa as well, which I think is particularly interesting and will be very telling depending on what happens with the Conservative leadership race.
Yeah, that's interesting, because he did say at one point earlier in his political career that he wanted to take on Justin Trudeau one day and be Prime Minister. So we'll see if that's something that people are talking about during this next term, if indeed he gets a second term. Right now, the results across the province, you see them at the bottom of your screen. The Progressive Conservatives leading or elected in 34 ridings, the NDP in 12, the Liberals in 5, and the Green Party in 1. And again, you're seeing on the left of your screen the early numbers in a number of ridings across Eastern Ontario. And so far, it appears most of the incumbents are leading in their ridings, including Stephen Blais in Orleans riding. Caitlin, let's talk about the local races. Do you expect any changes in Eastern Ontario? We've seen, it feels like we've seen a lot of elections. I know last time around there were some changes because of the Liberals being swept from power, but Eastern Ontario is often a place with a lot of stability. We just saw that in the last federal election, for example.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I mean, there's a couple of tight races, but again, I feel like we're having deja vu, Mark. I feel like last time we talked about how nothing changed in the federal election, and I think we're going to see that again tonight in Ontario. I think there's a couple of extremely close races, but for the most part, it's just same old, same old.
Yeah. Jennifer, what do you think about some of the local races? Anything that you're keeping an eye on?
I think it's interesting what's happening in Ottawa Centre. Jill Harden and Katie Gibbs. She received a lot of attention from the media and from Liberal supporters, both provincially and nationally. It doesn't look like she's going to win the seat, but certainly it was a contentious race. I think Lanark Frontenac Kingston will be interesting. As you likely know, Randy Hillier was the previous elected official in that riding. He was extremely controversial. He was kicked out of caucus by Doug Ford. Typically very much a blue riding, but has been tainted by how blue and how far right Hillier did go. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of creeps up within that riding. But I think, again, it's slated to go Conservative, but there's some bridge building to be made with the party.
The numbers are coming in quickly. Each time we update the numbers in some of the local ridings, we see more votes being added. And across the province, we've got about, 73 ridings reporting right now, and the Conservatives, the Progressive Conservatives, led by Doug Ford, are leading in 47 of them, and it takes 63 to get a majority. I think one of the questions people are asking is, will Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives, will they end up with more seats in this government, in this parliament, than they did last time around? So we'll be watching that. But the early indications seem to confirm what the polls were saying, which is that Doug Ford appears headed to another majority government. I want to take a moment to talk about Andrea Horwath and the NDP. And Caitlin, this is the fourth election for Andrea Horwath, and it was a breakthrough last time around for them to become the official opposition. And clearly they were the choice of a lot more progressive voters than Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals were in 2018. But I think there's a sense that if Andrea Horwath couldn't take it further in this election, and if she couldn't make a lot of progress, that this might be her last election as leader. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is 4 elections. That's a lot of elections for a leader. I think if she maintains or stays close to where she is, there is obviously a strategic conversation to be had after the fact in terms of, can she make a difference? Because as you were saying earlier, it's not surprising that Doug Ford is serving 2 terms. So does she get one last, kick at the can as, her fifth election? Again, I think tonight will sort of put that sort of into better perspective. But I think, all in all, she's done a good job. And I think she had COVID and laryngitis during the campaign, so I feel a bit bad for her as someone who's had laryngitis in the last 2 weeks. But
you weren't even running for election. And
I'm not running for elections. I just talk too much, guys. But yeah, I think, tonight's going to be a pretty big night for her, and I think, if things don't go well, I think the writing's probably on the wall for her.
Yeah. All right, let's bring in Cormac McSweeney, a reporter for City News, who covers federal politics mostly, but all politics. Cormac, great to chat with you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good to speak with you, Mark.
So what do you think? What are you hearing, and how have political observers been reacting to this Ontario election, which appears to be headed towards a very similar result to the last one?
Well, yeah, I think that's the point here, is that a lot of people think it's going to end up being status quo in terms of dealing with the Ford government as the government in Ontario. The question is, how large might their government be? Is it going to be that majority? Will it be stronger than last time? But of course, as you pointed out with your previous guests, there are big questions around the leaderships of both Stephen Del Duca and Andrea Horwath, depending on where they finish. So, there will be a lot of conversations moving forward about strategically where they go on this. But, from the federal government perspective, this will just be business as usual if the Ford government does what a lot of people are expecting and come back with another majority government, because the Trudeau government's been working with them quite well for the last 4 years, despite the fact that, they are of different parties, at different viewpoints on a number of issues, but they've been able to put their differences aside and work together quite well. And so I think that relationship will just continue moving forward.
Yeah, and that says something, doesn't it, about Doug Ford and his ability to work with others. I think back, Cormac, to that famous Maclean's magazine cover where I think it said The Resistance, and it showed Andrew Scheer, and 4 or 5 premiers from across Canada who were Conservative, including Jason Kenney and Doug Ford and Brian Pallister, who was the Premier of Manitoba at the time. And they were meant to be, the forces of conservatism in this country who were Justin Trudeau's worst nightmare. And many of those people aren't in those jobs anymore, including Andrew Scheer, soon to be Jason Kenney. Brian Pallister's gone. But Doug Ford's still around, and he isn't really, in a way, Justin Trudeau's worst nightmare. He's actually kind of an ally in some ways of Justin Trudeau, somebody he can work with. And I know there are people who compare Doug Ford's conservatism to that of, say, Bill Davis from another generation in Ontario. So what do you think that says about Ford, and what does it say about conservatism in Canada?
Well, it's interesting to look at the way Ford handles his government and, his rhetoric through a number of different issues that have popped up over the last couple of years, from vaccine mandates to the trucker convoy. He hasn't been taking such a divisive side on those issues like we've seen from some others, such as, as you mentioned, Jason Kenney. We have a conservative leadership race going on right now. Pierre Poilievre was one of those people who was out there with the truckers, standing with them. So I think Doug Ford and his team have been able to, you could call it cooperative conservatism, if you will, working well with others and trying not to rock the boat too much on issues that he knows might actually divide the base, his voting base, not necessarily the conservative base, because he's been able to draw in people who would otherwise vote for maybe the Liberals or possibly even the NDP in other elections. And so that sort of approach that he's taken to politics is a little bit different than what we see on the federal stage right now and what we've seen on the federal stage for some time. And a little bit different than some of the Western premiers. Brian Pallister was another premier who worked kind of well with the Trudeau government and was able to cross party lines in order to try and get stuff done for his people, and sending that message out to the voters that, look, I don't care who I have to work with, I just want the best for my voters, is something that Ford has said time and time again, and it's stuck in the minds with voters, and it's worked out well for him. I think it was mentioned earlier on your show, and I'll repeat it, he adores Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. That's a good friend to have when you have the federal finance minister in a good working relationship with you, and it shows that he doesn't care about what party they're in, as long as they can work together for the betterment of the people in their jurisdiction. And obviously it's worked well for him. I think moving forward, there are a number of different issues that they'll they might clash with, but they can also work together on. Affordable housing is something they'll work together on. Taxes and affordability, that's something where they might clash on. But I think, there are some other issues around guns and decriminalization of drugs that we might see some tensions as well with the federal government, but we could be surprised. So it's worked out really well for Ford moving forward, and we'll see where the relationship goes from here.
And Cormac, do you think there's a lesson in this for federal Conservatives and for the people who are running for the party leadership federally? And is it a lesson they're going to heed, that there is still room for middle-of-the-road conservatism, and that it can work, that it can be something that draws people to the Conservative Party? Because that seems to be the battle that's going on at the federal level right now, is which brand of conservatism will win out.
Yeah, and you see certain candidates such as Pierre Poilievre or Leslie Lewis pushing more of that social conservative side of things, pushing a sort of wedge politics style leadership campaign, and then you have others like maybe the Jean Charest who are trying to be more of that middle of the road candidate. But leadership campaigns and general campaigns are two very different beasts. And I think for a leadership campaign with a party like the Conservative Party federally, you're going to run in that a lot differently than you would run in a general election. You're appealing to a different base. And so, what will really matter is what they do after they take the leadership. You look at Aaron O'Toole as an example. When he ran his first leadership campaign, his unsuccessful one, he was very much that middle of the road, trying to be the common sense conservative rather than going to the righter wing of the base. And then when he won, he did it by appealing to the right wing of the base. That's how he was able to win the leadership. The question was whether he was going to stick with that side or go back to a sort of middle of the road thing when he went to the general election. It didn't work out for him in the end. He ended up taking some of those right wing ideologies with him into the campaign. But this is a soul-searching moment for the Conservative Party. One would argue every single leadership campaign is a soul-searching moment for a party, and they'll have to make their decision. But it'll be interesting to see, no matter who they choose, who they pick as their person to lead them into the next general election, whether that Conservative leader decides to change tactics or not, and take a page out of the Doug Ford book, if you will, in trying to appeal to a more general audience in Canada.
All right. Cormac, great stuff. I appreciate you joining us tonight. I know it'll be a busy night for you as you continue to follow the results. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, Mark.
Cormac McSweeney, City News reporter on Parliament Hill, and covering all politics across the country and major events as well. So let's update the numbers for you. The Progressive Conservatives leading or elected right now in 66 ridings, 66 out of 124. That's enough for a majority, but of course these are not final results, they're interim results. But that's the threshold, is 63. So if that number holds or grows, then Doug Ford will have a second majority government in the province of Ontario. The NDP leading or elected in 24, the Liberals in 9 ridings, which would be an increase over the 7 they had last time. Now they're at 10. The Green Party in 1 riding. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that's Mike Schreiner, the party leader's riding. He is the only Green Party incumbent in this election. And then there's one other candidate who's leading somewhere in this province who's not from one of the 4 main parties in this election. There are a couple of new parties that are fielding candidates. The Ontario Party, led by Derek Sloan, and the former federal Conservative MP, and the New Blue Party as well. Many of you will have seen signs in your ridings for those candidates. Not expected to make a huge difference in this election. I think there were some people wondering if they might, one of those might turn into kind of an Ontario version of the People's Party of Canada that would take votes away from the Progressive Conservatives, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, it does appear as though Doug Ford is headed to another majority government. So, Jennifer Stewart, I want to talk a little bit more about Doug Ford, and I know that, there are people who are critical of his style. They, will think back to when his brother Rob was the mayor of Toronto and the tumultuous time in Toronto's history that was. But Cormac alluded to something which I think is worth stressing, that Doug Ford has this way about him that I think attracts a lot of people, that both he and his brother Rob, notwithstanding all of the controversies, they do project this image that they are in it for the people. Rob Ford famously returned every phone call. Doug Ford, I remember 4 years ago when he was sworn in as premier, he gave out his cell phone number. So there is that sort of dynamic that they kind of have this way of communicating that they are there for the people of Ontario.
I bet he regrets giving out a cell phone number now. Listen, when Doug Ford...
I'm going to text him right now and ask.
When Doug Ford went into the election, 60% of Ontarians didn't trust him. That's down to 40 now. That's pretty impressive, because typically that's a trajectory that keeps climbing throughout the tenure of a politician. So what he did was he communicated to the people of Ontario almost daily during the pandemic. He didn't use scientific or medical words that people did not understand. He was reassuring, he was folksy, and when he made a mistake, his people were smart enough to take him away from the limelight and then reintroduce him when it made sense. On climate, he did release a climate plan. He did invest in electric vehicle infrastructure. He has healthcare is a different issue that many people have contentious perspectives on. But for the most part, he kind of towed a very centrist line and really engaged with Ontarians. So I think in terms of his likability, it's hard not to see, whether you agree with his politics or not, that he's probably a pretty nice guy. The economy and inflation is a huge concern as we move forward, and people probably don't want change. They want a government that has shown that they can manage a pandemic and can come and continue their work. They know the files and continue to navigate the soaring inflation rates, the economic instability both here in Canada and internationally, and kind of maintain the work that they've done. You know, if you start fresh with a new government at this point, you're playing catch up, you're looking at new policies, you're looking at diversions of policies. So I think that played well for him. I really think it's a lesson, and Cormac touched upon this, for the federal, and I keep coming back to federal because I think there's a lot of alignments that we can make for the federal PC candidates, because he's towed that center line. And when we're seeing Leslyn Lewis and Pierre Poilievre be a bit more divisive and having some policies that, you know, aren't necessarily very central, they're very far right, it might not play well. If we're seeing him gain a landslide majority in Ontario, already they have the same amount of seats they had last election, and there's still a number of stations to come in, right, or sites to come in. So he's managed to be likable throughout the pandemic, and I think that served him really well.
Just want to update the local results, the Eastern Ontario results for you, and you're seeing them scroll through on the left of your screen. And in almost every case, it is the incumbent that is leading. So it looks like Joel Harden is on his way to re-election in Ottawa Centre for the NDP. That Lisa MacLeod is on her way to re-election in Nepean riding, and so on. The one race that might turn out to be an upset is in Ottawa West Nepean, and we mentioned earlier that that race was decided by only 175 votes in the last election. It was a three-way race between the Progressive Conservatives, the NDP, and the Liberals, and Jeremy Roberts won the riding for the Progressive Conservatives with only 175 votes more than the NDP candidate, Chandra Pasma. And right now, Pasma is in the lead in that riding in Ottawa West Nepean with about 37% of the votes to Jeremy Roberts' 32%. Now, it's early. We don't know where those results are coming from, which part of the riding they're coming from. Sometimes in ridings, you can have a portion of the riding where there's a disproportionate number of voters for a particular party, so things could play out differently over the course of the evening, but it's certainly one to watch, and it could be the only one that changes hands in Eastern Ontario tonight. The Liberals are leading or elected in 9 seats, which is only a slight increase over the number they had previously. The Progressive Conservatives in 71, the NDP in 26. So Caitlin, all of the early results seem to indicate everything that people were expecting here, which was another Doug Ford majority government.
Yep. As I was saying earlier, I feel like we're seeing more of the same. I think there's something that Jennifer touched on earlier that I'd like to talk about around, you know, the federal Conservatives and how, you know, they could take some pointers from Doug Ford. I think it's been interesting that Doug Ford's been notably absent from many things, including the storm that we had in Ottawa recently. You know, he didn't come until after. He wasn't around during the convoy. And I think the strategic decisions that keep him out of the limelight when, you know, others probably would have stepped in has been really fascinating. And, you know, he is now avoiding the Trumpism kind of politics of Pierre Poilievre. So maybe Pierre's watching and he should take some pointers. But yeah, I think, you know, with the exception of the riding you just explained, I think it's pretty safe to say that we're more of the same again.
Yeah, it is close. You can see the numbers in Nepean there on your screen. It is close in that riding, but Stephen Blais is on his way to re-election in Orleans. There's a little check mark next to his face. Joel Harden, the same thing. Those are people who have now been declared elected by the people who do that sort of thing on election night. Many of the major networks are now projecting a Doug Ford majority government for the second time in a row, so I don't think that's a big surprise. They've got 74. They're leading or elected in 74 ridings. This one, Glengarry Prescott Russell, could be interesting because Amanda Simard is the Liberal incumbent, but she was elected as a Progressive Conservative in the last election, left the party, sat as an independent for a while, then joined the Liberals. So she's actually in second place in the voting so far. And then again, we are keeping an eye on Ottawa West Nepean. Some of the numbers you've seen on your screen for Ottawa West Nepean tonight are showing the Ontario Party with a big vote total. That is actually not the case. So there's a little bit of a glitch in the system. We're going to try to continue to update that for you. Here's another close one in Ottawa Vanier, perhaps closer than most people would have expected. But as of the latest numbers I have, it appears as though Chandra Pasma is leading with, again, about 37-38% of the vote, and Jeremy Roberts, the Progressive Conservative incumbent, with about 33% of the vote. All right, we're going to talk about the province-wide results and what actually did happen during this election campaign with David Coletto, the CEO of Abacus Data, who has been surveying the opinions of Ontarians throughout this election campaign. David, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Mark. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So what do you think? What was this election about? What was top of mind for Ontarians? If presuming the election was actually top of mind for Ontarians, what were the issues that were top of mind for them?
Yeah, I would say that for many Ontarians, the election wasn't top of mind. We've been tracking just interest in the campaign throughout the election, and there were a lot of people, close to 45%, who said they weren't following this campaign close at all, or even a little bit. So I do think and turnout suggests, that there's some commentary about turnout not even hitting 50% tonight. So that aligns with some of that expectations. But for those that were engaged in this campaign, I think it came down to really two issues. It was about affordability, the cost of living and housing affordability sort of rolled into one, and healthcare. Those two issues really dominated when we asked people what they cared about and what they wanted to hear from the political leaders. And the reason that Doug Ford is doing, and the PCs are doing so well tonight across the province, is because on especially affordability, when we ask people who's going to do the best on that issue, the PCs and Doug Ford always came well ahead of the other two parties. And so elections are often decided by the party you think is going to handle the issue you care the most about. And in this case, the PCs clearly won on that question, as the cost of living and interest rates and inflation really are focused in people's minds.
So let's come back to Doug Ford in a moment, but I want to talk about the opposition leaders. I think there were points in the last 4 years where there were, partisans from both the Liberals and the NDP who would have been rubbing their hands at the prospect of running against Doug Ford in 2022 and thinking that there would be an opportunity to knock the Progressive Conservatives out. But that's not what's going to end up happening here. We can talk about what Doug Ford did to get back on track, but why didn't the Liberals and or the NDP take advantage of the opportunity they had here? What was missing for them?
Well, I think there's two things. One is you have to create, and we'll come back to Doug Ford, it may be because of what he was able to do in the last 2 years, but you have to create a desire for change. People have to want or have to believe that the incumbent government needs to be defeated. And in our polling, about half of Ontarians said they definitely wanted to see a change in government. And while that's a lot of people in our kind of system where you can win an election, as Doug Ford's going to do tonight, win a big majority with only 40% of the vote, that's insufficient. And so there wasn't as broad and deep a desire for change as we had seen. If you go back to 2018 when Kathleen Wynne was defeated, we got 65% of people saying they definitely wanted a change in government. So that was a change election, and this one didn't turn out to be one. And I think the second reason is neither of the two main opposition party leaders, and if you include Mike Schreiner in there, the three opposition party leaders, were all that compelling to people, right? Andrea Horwath had run 3 times previously. She gained a little bit of traction and was fairly popular in the last election, but had not really built on that over the last 4 years. And Stephen Del Duca entered the race really with a serious name recognition problem and didn't have enough time to turn that around. And so at the end of the day, Doug Ford for many people wasn't, for enough people, deeply, repelling, and none of the opposition parties really appealed enough to people. So at the end of the day, people either stayed home, which many are going to do, or those that did vote, more of them said, relative to the others, Doug Ford is good enough, and I'm happy to have him back in.
Yeah, so let's talk about Doug Ford, David, because I have this sense that he's the kind of political figure who, when you first are getting to know him, he doesn't, he's not the warmest and fuzziest figure. He's not the most effective communicator. He's a bit rough around the edges. But I feel like over the last 4 years, on some level, many Ontarians have gotten used to him, and that when you're, it's a lot harder to beat somebody. I mean, obviously you can get tired of someone after a long period of time, but after only 4 years, if you're used to somebody, if you're comfortable with them, if you're accustomed to them, it's hard to sort of, for an opposition party to kind of portray peril if they're reelected, right?
Absolutely, and in the case of the last, particularly 2.5 years, I think many people in the province who earlier would have said Doug Ford is a disaster as a premier, and he was the least popular premier in the country in his first 2 years in office. The pandemic changed that, and it changed the way people saw him. Someone who, they saw every day, demonstrating empathy, sometimes making mistakes and saying things that seemed a little bit off, but knowing deep down, I think, that he was doing the best that he can. And in politics, we often take that for granted as something that's really valuable to people. People know that these are, human beings are running our province. Human beings are making decisions, and so they make mistakes. And I think for Doug Ford, what happened in the last 2 years is people said, look, he's not perfect. He's not the best premier we've ever had. But only 35% of Ontarians in our survey described him as a bad or terrible premier. Everyone else said he's either okay or he's good. And so, you said maybe he's not warm. I think Doug Ford is kind of warm. He rubs people sometimes the right way because he's just comforting, and he's become a comforting source of people during a really difficult time. And I've heard in the research we've been doing that for many people, he got us through this crisis, and people appreciated that. He didn't make big mistakes. And so at the end of the day, a lot of people who voted for him last time, and I think a number of people who didn't, frankly, decided this time he deserved another kick at the can.
Was there anything else about how Doug Ford turned things around other than the pandemic? Was there anything else at play, do you think?
Well, I think I think the campaign, the PC campaign, struck on a nerve that many people in the province were feeling, was that this whole, let's get it done, let's move on, let's start building again. And I think that tapped into just a sheer exhaustion that many people were feeling about the pandemic. And while there are concerns about our health system, there are concerns about, our education system, people didn't fear another 4 years of Doug Ford. And so he really was able to make this election about the future. And while the opposition parties needed to make it in part about the past, they didn't really contest his vision of a province that's growing and building and moving forward. And 40% or so of those who voted today thought that was the way they wanted to go, and I think it will win the day in terms of the narrative. And so it was an effective campaign that way. It struck a mood of people just wanting to move past this.
Yeah. And last question, David, what do you think this means for conservatism? I asked this question of Cormac McSweeney, who was our guest earlier, and he brought up a good point that when you're a candidate running for the party leadership, especially federally, you've got to cater to the membership of the party. When you're running then in a federal election or any general election in this country, you're catering to the entire electorate. So I don't want to compare apples and oranges, but is there a lesson? Is Doug Ford maybe a lesson for federal conservatives in some way?
Well, I think Doug Ford, when he ran to become a progressive conservative leader, I think he ran as Doug Ford, and he ran as Doug Ford this time. And I think what the lesson is for conservatives is you can run and expand the tent, right? There is about 1 out of 5 people who voted PC tonight or in advanced polls voted for Justin Trudeau federally, right? That's a lot of people who crossed what would seemingly be an impossible chasm in Canadian and Ontario politics. You can't imagine two different political leaders, and yet there's a lot of millions of people in this province who voted for both of these gentlemen over the last year and a half. And I think that's the lesson to conservatives, is there is one strategy that says you need to go to the run from the right, consolidate that, motivate the base. Doug Ford showed tonight you can win by being a center-right, conservative, and you can win Ontario overwhelmingly. Up now at 78 seats, he might hit 80 tonight. Stephen Harper came nowhere near that when he won his majority in 2011 in Ontario. So this is a formula that some federally need to think about. It's very different. You've got Alberta, you've got different parts of the country that you need to contend with, but you cannot win nationally as a conservative unless you win Ontario. So there's maybe a lesson here for federal conservatives to take from Doug Ford's big win tonight.
All right, great stuff, David. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
David Coletto, the CEO of Abacus Data. We continue to update the numbers for you, and now we are 45 minutes past when the polls have closed in most ridings across the province. There were a few that had some technical glitches, so they kept the polls open for an extra 24 minutes, including Ottawa-Vanier. But now we're seeing results from across the province, and you can see it's another Doug Ford majority government. The Progressive Conservatives are leading or elected in 81 of 124 seats across the province. So that is 2/3 of the seats in this province. And the Liberals are at 8, the NDP at 27, the Green Party at 1. So there will be questions tonight about the future of the leaders of the two opposition parties, the two main opposition parties, the NDP and the Liberals, because they have not made significant gains. Doug Ford's job looks pretty secure. The big question will be, what does he do next, not just in the next 4 years, but in his political career? Will he seek a third term as Ontario Premier? Will he decide to go into federal politics or step away from politics altogether before the next provincial election, which now I think we can safely say will be 4 years from now and not sooner? You continue to see the results locally on the left-hand side of your screen. And where you see a red check mark, that means that the candidate in that riding has been declared elected. There are still some races that have not been decided, including Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, and Ottawa West Nepean, which is very close, and we are continuing to keep an eye on that. Even in Nepean, where Cabinet Minister Lisa MacLeod is running for re-election, it's still too close to call. She's ahead, but it's too close to call. In Ottawa Centre, Joel Harden has been re-elected, and just minutes ago, here's what he said to his supporters at his campaign party.
I think I want to congratulate Andrea for leading us 4 times into 4 election campaigns. I was asked in French if I think we need a change in leadership. I do. But I want to congratulate Andrea on her hard work for our party, her hard work for our province. Now we're in a moment where I personally believe it's time for us to move past partisan sniping. It's time for us to put our communities first. And if there are issues that I can work on with the Ford government, I'm prepared to do that. But if, as I've seen in the past, Mr. Ford doesn't recognize some of Ottawa's concerns, like the convoy where it took 14 days to act, I'm going to make sure he knows. That's my job.
Are you considering a run for the leadership of the NDP?
It's not on my mind right now, to be very honest with you. What's on my mind right now is celebrating and valuing all of the donors and volunteers and community members that are in there. That's foremost in my mind right now. But what is absolutely on my mind now when I think about the provincial scene is moving into a kind of politics where it's less about us sniping at each other and more about us getting some things done. I think people are fed up with ego politics. And what I learned from Paul Dewar in particular is that Paul put relationships between politicians and relationships between community members first, and I think it improved the quality of politics, and that's what I'm prepared to do too.
All right, that's Joel Harden in Ottawa Centre, re-elected there, and already saying he thinks it's time for a change in the leadership of his party. And what I find interesting about that, Caitlin, is he's sort of implying that Andrea Horwath was kind of approaching politics the wrong way, that it was ego politics and it was attacks rather than building relationships. Caitlin?
I assume that he's sort of putting that more broadly to the, Trumpism kind of attack politics that are becoming far more regular in Canada. And, the Americanization of our political system is not a great thing, and that's definitely not something we should aspire to. I think I agree that, you know, we need to work across party lines to move things forward, and I think that any successful political system is going to need that. I mean, I'm seeing the voter turnout's being said that it's going to be around maybe 45%, which means that really literally approximately 17% of Ontarians will have elected and chosen the Conservatives. That's by no means a real majority of Ontarians. So I think, you know, there's sort of the onus is needed to kind of work together.
Yeah, that is how the system works, though, of course, is that the elections are decided by the people who vote, right, and not by the people who don't. But I do find it interesting that it's election night and a re-elected MPP is actually calling for a change in leadership of the party before the leader of the party even has a chance to speak to her supporters. Jennifer, what do you think about that?
I think it's really telling that there's a significant amount of disgruntlement within the party to go publicly when you are declared and to say that there needs to be a new leader. I think in politics you need to know when to go, and I think after 4 elections the writing is on the wall. I think she does need to go. It looks like the NDP are down about 10 seats right now, so that's not a great position to be in. They need to bring fresh blood to the party, and I think if this is your job and you are an NDP member, you have to realize that part of your job is holding your leader accountable and understanding, you know, treating this almost like a business. When you need a new CEO in place because there's poor brand recognition with your current leader, she has been in the position of the opposition, which is never a position to share the positive news. You're always holding people to account and people's feet to the fire. That you need somebody new in place, and I think that's what he's getting at. I think he is being very specific about Andrea Horwath in terms of her nitpicking at the Ford government, and he's calling for change. And I don't think he could be any more clear about that. I don't think he's beating around the bush at all.
You just mentioned the potential drop tonight for the NDP. If the current numbers hold, it will be a gain of 13 seats for the Progressive Conservatives, a loss of 10 for the NDP, and a gain of 2 for the Liberals. And Caitlin, I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because there are no big wins here for Stephen Del Duca or Andrea Horwath in that scenario. Yeah, Stephen Del Duca can say they've gained a couple of seats, but going from 7 to 9 as the party that was in power for more than 10 years, just going back 4 years ago, is not a big win, and I would say 28 seats for the NDP is a loss, right?
Yeah, for sure. And as we said off the top of the show, for both the Liberal and NDP leaders, if they didn't show improvement or at least staying the same, you know, it was probably likely the end of their leaderships. And so, I mean, it'll remain to be seen if the Liberals make that decision, but I think with Joel Harding coming out immediately and saying that perhaps it's time, I think that's probably some pretty hard underline in terms of what might happen next.
Yeah. I want to draw attention to Ottawa West Nepean again because the latest numbers I have show Chandra Pasma with a lead of about 450 votes on the incumbent Progressive Conservative Jeremy Roberts, who again won that riding by only 175 votes in the last election. This has often been, throughout political history, federally and provincially, a riding that has swung back and forth between the Liberals and the Progressive Conservatives. It's a riding that was represented in the past, for example, by Jim Watson, who's now the Mayor of Ottawa, and Bob Chiarelli, who once was the Mayor of Ottawa and is running to be the Mayor of Ottawa again. And so this is kind of an interesting riding for there to be an NDP breakthrough, although I'll point out as well that the boundaries change and populations change and things happen over time. So it might not be the same riding that it was in previous generations. But while across the province, the Progressive Conservatives are making big gains, one of the places where they may lose a seat and the NDP might pick one up is Ottawa West Nepean. Jennifer, I find that really interesting that that's sort of bucking the trend of the rest of the election.
Well, as you said, it was Bob Chiarelli's riding, it was Mayor Jim Watson's riding, so there's clearly a Liberal base within that riding. And as we've seen, the Liberal base is swinging more NDP because there's a lot of shared values between those two parties. So, I think that's where we're seeing that support. And a lot of people are judging how the pandemic was handled on a local scale, right? I mean, obviously there's huge support for how Doug Ford handled the pandemic, but people want to see their elected MPP in their riding, providing some sense of solace for what businesses and individuals and families have been through and are continuing to go through. And I think when you see such a drastic shift from Conservative to NDP within a local riding, you're seeing a huge amount of disgruntlement for that specific member.
And Caitlin, one of the things I think about when I see the results in Ottawa West Nepean is, do you think maybe there was some strategic voting going on there? That there were, after the close results in the last election, that there were some Liberals who thought, you know what, we'll put our votes behind the NDP candidate just to defeat the Progressive Conservative in that riding?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always surprised that there's not more strategic voting because, when you're splitting the vote, no matter whether it's between the left or the right, there's an obvious way forward. So yeah, I think you probably are seeing it. I mean, I know in my own riding of Carleton, I think people were very torn about whether they should vote for the Liberal or the NDP. And I think if you look at the numbers, they're pretty close. So I think, if you added them both up together, the outcome would be very different. So I think you're probably right.
Yeah. All right, final thoughts. It appears Doug Ford, no question now, is headed to another majority government. He will be the Premier of Ontario. There are big questions about the future of the leadership of Andrea Horwath, the leader of the NDP, and Stephen Del Duca of the Liberal Party. Jennifer, what will you be watching for in the weeks ahead as this new government takes shape?
I'll be watching to see if ministerial mandate letters are made public or not. I have a feeling they won't be. If there is a shift in cabinet, and I also suspect there won't be. I think, as Doug said, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get to work, and having consistency in who those cabinet ministers are and their portfolios, unless he is personally not happy with their performance, people will remain in place. So I think it's going to be status quo, and I think they're going to hit the ground running.
Caitlin, what are you going to be watching for in the days and weeks ahead?
I'm going to take my license plate money and go buy some beers. I think that I don't want to keep saying more of the same, but I feel like we're repeating the past and sort of heading into the same sort of same old, and hopefully by the next time people are a little more engaged and voter turnout will be higher, and hopefully things like social housing and the environment have been reprioritized, which is the big concern that I have with another Conservative government, is that we're not paying attention to the things that really matter in the long run.
Yeah, I guess the license plate. The cost of renewing your license plate is going to stay at zero going forward, so that's not going to change. And we're not going to see a 4-day work week introduced by a Liberal government, which was something Stephen Del Duca was talking about doing on a trial basis. There were other proposals, of course, from the Liberals that we're not going to see happen because they're going to be facing some big existential questions. All right, Jennifer, Caitlin, thank you so much for being part of our coverage tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Pleasure to be here.
And just to recap, it is a Doug Ford majority government for the second straight election. Locally, it appears there are a couple of seats that might be changing hands. Still not clear, too close to call in Ottawa West Nepean and in Glengarry Prescott Russell. But it does appear that most of the ridings in the Ottawa area and throughout Eastern Ontario are staying the same. So what happens next? We'll be watching to see what Doug Ford will do in his second term as Premier. And we might be watching for some leadership races in the two opposition parties, the two main opposition parties. We will continue to keep an eye on the results, as I'm sure you will as well. Thank you for joining us tonight on Rogers TV. Good night.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I'm Julian Armour from Music and Beyond. Join us for a new show this spring on Rogers called Music and Beyond Presents.
It's going to be a brutal fight.
I'm coming home with the bell.
Yuri Prohaska!
He's here to take over.
Valentina Shevchenko!
She is a straight-up assassin.
Tyler Santos, flyweight's newest contender.
One of the most epic fights in the history of the UFC.
The UFC's going to Singapore.
This card's stacked from top to bottom. I cannot wait.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
Of comfort.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa.
And the Valley.
This is City News.
On 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 2nd of June, election night in Ontario. Good evening, I'm Jason White. In Ottawa, a cloudy sky and 18 degrees, 17 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley.
Now, City News, in-depth team coverage.
Ontario sticks with a Ford, deciding not to trade in for a different model. City News declares a PC majority government. The Progressive Conservatives currently leading or elected in 80 seats. The NDP, 29. The Liberals, 9. The Green retaining 1 seat so far. Now, the NDP have held on to Ottawa Centre tonight. Joel Harden retaining the seat, keeping it away from his Liberal challenger. While Harden will stick around, he thinks the leader should not. Chris Curry's at Harden headquarters.
Joel Harden is leading handily in Ottawa Centre. The riding declared early, and he kept telling supporters, this is about us, and this is for you. And he showed some genuine excitement when it was announced, throwing his arms up in the air. But he spoke to reporters after, and he was asked what the future is for Andrea Horwath as NDP leader.
I want to congratulate Andrea for leading us 4 times into 4 election campaigns. I was asked in French if I think we need a change in leadership. I do, but I want to congratulate Andrea on her hard work for our party, her hard work for our province. Now we're in a moment where I personally believe it's time for us to move past partisan sniping.
As for if he will take a run at the party leadership, he says that's not on his mind right now, and he wants to focus on celebrating with family and in the community. In Ottawa Centre, Chris Curry's City News.
City News time 10:02. It is looking like things are shaping up to be a PC upset out in Glengarry Prescott Russell, with the party on track to take back that seat from the incumbent, a former PC turned independent, turned Liberal. Right now, 25 out of 99 polls reporting PC Stéphane Sarrazin leading with 43% of the vote. Liberal incumbent Amanda Simard, 37%. The NDP with 9% in that riding. Ottawa West Nepean still too close to call. Right now, the NDP are leading, but it is a very close race. 55 out of 70 polls are in so far in Ottawa West Nepean. The NDP's Chandra Pasma pulling in 37% of the vote. Incumbent, the PC's Jeremy Roberts, 35%. The Liberals' Sam Balasar in third at 22% right now.
City News. Ontario votes 2022 election alert.
Okay, so here are the local ridings where it's shaped up to be a pretty cut and dry situation. We can declare in Nepean, PC Lisa McLeod re-elected. Canada Carleton, PC Marilee Fullerton re-elected. Lanark Frontenac Kingston, PC John Jordan elected. That one is a win back for the PCs after the independent MPP Randy Hillier decided not to reoffer. Councillor. Leeds Grenville Thousand Islands tonight. PC Steve Clark, re-elected. Renfrew Nipissing Pembroke. PC John Yakubuski, re-elected. Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, PC candidate Nolan Quinn, elected, retaining that seat for the Conservatives. Carleton, PC Goldie Gamari, re-elected. In the city, Ottawa South, Liberal John Fraser, re-elected. Ottawa Vanier, Liberal Lucille Collard, re-elected. And in Orleans, former city councillor, now MPP, Liberal Stephen Blais, re-elected in Orleans. Election night coverage continues. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
From your riding
to what's happening across the province,
the race for Queen's Park ends here. This is Ontario Votes 2022 on City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM. Here's Rob Snow.
And I'm here with Sam LaPrade and Derek Fage, my co-hosts for Ontario Votes tonight on City News. The election ends here, and it ends with another PC majority government, a second term for Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs, leading are elected in 80 seats. The New Democrats will form the official opposition with 29. The Liberals, 9 seats. Again, not achieving so far official party status. Steve Del Duca defeated in the riding where he was running his home riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. So lots of questions about where things go from here, but one of the big local winners is in Ottawa Centre. It's a convincing victory for Joel Harden, returned tonight, and he will be headed back to Queen's Park. He joins us right now on City News. Good evening, Joel Harden.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
How did this happen for you tonight?
Oh, well, being a politician is an interesting life, Rob. I mean, you work for years. All of us have our own approaches to it. My hero was Jack Layton. That's how I got started in the 90s. And what I kept hearing from Jack is you put the community first, you put it before your career. Sometimes you even put it before your own political party because you need to do what the community's asking you to do. And that's what, honestly, I've tried to do, Rob, with an amazing, talented team in the office, hundreds of volunteers. We've really tried to be at the service of the community movements that got us through the pandemic so far, that helped us get through the convoy. They're helping our neighbors every day. And these people, Rob, they don't seek credit. They do it mostly on volunteer labor. So I've really tried to work hard for them. And I think that's what the voters in Ottawa Centre rewarded tonight. They want a politician with a little less ego who's going to roll up their sleeves and support the community and get to work.
Sam LaPrade.
Congratulations, Joel. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I have to ask you congratulated the leader of the NDP party, of course, saying congratulations for all your hard work, Andrea, and sort of said, and it's time for you to go. What's the thought there, Joel?
Well, I was asked if directly by a colleague in the media if I thought it was time for a change in our leadership, and I do. I think what I saw in this election on all sides, frankly, from all parties, is a lot of partisanship, a lot of sniping. And I kept hearing from neighbors, Sam, that people are tired of that. They want us to roll up our sleeves and get results. So case in point, I'm a New Democrat, but I worked hard, as you know, for that public inquiry into the light rail transit system for 2 years after hearing a strong push from neighbors and community leaders. I managed to convince the Ford government and Minister Tara Mulroney to do exactly that. So that's a case where we're finally going to know what's in this contract, which has been secretive and kept from elected decision makers, so we can get that train working, because we urgently need it working. And I think that's what I mean. We need, and it's not just our party, all parties need to snipe at each other a little less, and we need to get some things done.
Derek Fage.
Joel, congratulations from myself as well. You mentioned that you'd be, obviously said earlier that you'd be open to working with Doug Ford. What are some of the things that, you think that you and the Premier can work on specifically here in the Ottawa area, not just in your riding, but in Ottawa as a whole, that you think that perhaps, you could get on the same page with Doug Ford?
Great question. So I think I can make to Mr. Ford, Rob, the business case for us to link our electrical system more with our neighbors in Quebec. That is very affordable, low-cost hydroelectricity as we refurbish our nuclear capacity that would really help us save a big uptick in emissions from the gas-fired electrical plants. I've been on your show talking about that. I look at the mental health crisis. It's all over our communities, and mental health crisis has hit my own family. I know it's hit the Premier's family. I know he cares about it. He's talked about it. And if we're prepared to fund the community leaders that are working on that right now and expand access to therapy, to prescription medications, to keep people safe, community health centers, and their outreach workers that can help small businesses right away if they have someone in mental health crisis walking into their store and they don't know what to do and they think, maybe if I call the police, this might get worse. I'd love to work with the Premier on a coherent mental health strategy across the province because people who are in mental health crisis, we needed to reach them a long time before they got there. And the talent exists, Rob, in Ontario to do that with the money we're spending now.
I want to get just some clarification on what is going to be a very important project for our city going ahead, and that is the new civic campus of the Ottawa Hospital. Just what, can you please clarify what your concerns are about that site, please?
Well, I want to begin with the thing neighbors are talking to me about the roast, Rob, which is the parkade. So we were told for years by the Ottawa Hospital leadership that this parking capacity for the new hospital, where it's currently being scheduled to be built, was going to have 1,200 cars. It was going to be underground. And all of a sudden last May, the tables turned. And it's a 4-story above-ground parking garage for 2,500 spaces, as big as the Ottawa airport. And we're living in a climate emergency. We can't build infrastructure as if we aren't, because we just experienced in our own city a storm and more erratic weather. So that's the big focus of right now, Rob. It's not necessarily the location of the hospital. The community was told one thing about that parkade, and at the 11th hour, with zero consultation, they're being told another. So I intend to let the Premier know, my colleagues in government know, that the people of Ottawa, when they, in good faith, participate in a consultation process, and the tables are turned for no reason whatsoever, for the worst, I would say, they deserve respect. We need to reopen that particular issue, and that's my focus is on that. And my view of where the hospital should be is well known. It's on public record, but I kept hearing it, Rob, from people at the doorstep.
All right, Mr. Harden, we're going to have to let you go because the Premier's about to make his speech. Congratulations once again. Very convincing victory. A great job by you and your team, sir.
I appreciate that, Rob. Be well.
Yeah.
Take care, Sam.
Joel Harden is going back to Queen's Park as a New Democrat. We go live now to the victory speech. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, live on City News.
We have done the impossible. We have made history. Wow, I am just so grateful, so grateful. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this unforgettable moment. And I love you too. I'll tell you, I am so humbled by your support. I see some faces here tonight who've been with my family from day one. But what excites me the most, what just pumps me up, are all the new faces I see out there. So I am so grateful for all your support over the years. It's what keeps me going. And to the people of Ontario, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your trust, and thank you for once again putting your confidence in me. It's a responsibility that I will never take lightly. But most importantly, thank you for sharing in a vision for our great province. Sharing in a dream of a bright and prosperous future, an era of unprecedented growth and opportunity. So if you're a miner in the north who's out of work, I want you to know we're building that road to the Ring of Fire. If you've had to worry about your job at the local auto plant, I want you to know we're investing in the future of Ontario's auto sector. If you're a student who wants to work in the tech sector, we will have a job waiting for you. If you're a newcomer with a degree who can't get a job in your field, we'll make sure you can get credentials you need. This is what we're working for. This is what the Ontario dream is all about. And my promise to you, you single day I will get up and I will get to work, and I will do everything in my power to deliver on this dream. Because tonight's victory, it isn't about me, it isn't about the party. This victory belongs to every worker who knows that they deserve better. It belongs to every family who knows that they can dream bigger. But most of all, this victory belongs to each and every one of you. And to my rock, my wife Carla, my beautiful daughters, my entire family, thank you for always believing in me, and thank you for standing with me through thick and thin. I want to thank my entire campaign team and every candidate who ran for our party. But most importantly, I want to thank the thousands and thousands of volunteers who spent the last month hitting the doors. Together, we knocked on over 3 million doors during this campaign. That number is absolutely incredible. It's staggering. It takes an army to win a victory like this, so please know that tonight is your night. I also need to take a moment to recognize Andrea, Mike, and Stephen. It takes a lot to put your name forward in a race like this. And while we had different ideas, I truly believe that we share a desire to see Ontario succeed. And for my part, they deserve of applause. Thank you. And for my part, I did my best to run a positive campaign, to put forward a clear and consistent message, to offer a plan that everyone could get behind. I promised to build this province, to say yes to more housing, yes to attainable housing, so families once again can strive for the dream of home ownership. To say yes to building the infrastructure that keeps communities going. To put our workers to work, building the subways, the hospitals, and the highways that our growing province desperately needs. To run a smarter, more efficient government so we can reduce the unfair burdens like the license plate stickers and the gas tax. My friends, this is the plan I put forward. And I've spent the last 5 weeks traveling to every corner of this province, meeting with the hardworking women and men who are building Ontario. And I can tell you, we are ready. Ontario's ready, ready to get it done. We're ready to roll up our sleeves, to rise to the occasion, because we have the potential for greatness. We are blessed with every advantage, a bright and hard-working workforce, an abundance of natural resources. We have the critical minerals that the entire world is after. We have the capital, the technology, and the ingenuity. But most importantly, we have a vision, a dream. I see it as I look out into the crowd. I see it in your faces. I see hope. I see optimism. And your energy, your passion, it's what keeps me going every day. My friends, because it all started almost 3 decades ago, right here in Etobicoke. It started with my dad, Doug Ford Sr., my mom, Diane, and my brother, Rob, whose birthday was just last week, and who I owe so much to. I know that they're up there in heaven and they are celebrating with us tonight. Friends, it started with all of us together. And over the years, we've had our ups and downs. We've tasted victory and we've faced defeat. But through it all, we never gave up. And when I think about how far we've come, how far we've traveled together, we started as an idea, a new approach to politics. Thanks over the years, thanks to each of you showing up at our events, volunteering at the doors, spreading our message. Thanks to you, what started as an idea turned into a movement. change the landscape of this province and this country forever. Together, we're reimagining our party, we're reimagining our province, and tonight we have changed what it means to be a progressive conservative in Ontario. It's no longer about being part of the blue, the red, the orange, or green team. It's about recognizing that there's so much that unites us. This is my proudest achievement as a leader of this party, building a new coalition, expanding our base, creating a more inclusive party where everyone matters, because never in our lifetime has it been more important for a party to represent all of Ontario. Now more than ever, we need unity. The road ahead, it won't be easy. We have big challenges in front of us, an uncertain global economic climate. We are competing against other jurisdictions for every job, for every dollar of investment, but Ontario is stronger. We're absolutely unstoppable when we stand together. And so tonight, I call for unity. And whether you work on the assembly line and voted NDP your entire life or cast your last ballot for the federal Liberals, I want you to know that as long as I'm here, there's room for you in this party. I will fight for you every single day. And friends, when I think about the workers, when I think about the unions who got behind us in this election, when I think about the coalition that we've built together, it's incredible, because there was a time not long ago when some of the same people who are with us now couldn't see a home for themselves in this party. It wasn't easy. We had to admit our mistakes. We had to build back confidence, and that journey, it's not over. I'm the first to admit that there's more work to be done, but tonight's result, it proves that we're on the right track, that this approach is the right one, and tonight's results proves that this is how we get things done, by being inclusive, by focusing on what unites us, and being ready to work with anyone. And with this approach together, we are unstoppable, because we're just getting started. Tonight we celebrate because this is your night. Tonight the people have spoken from Windsor to Cornwall, from Timmins, and thank God Timmins, to Ajax. Together we're blazing a new trail, we're charting a new course, we're telling the world this is our time, this is our moment, because this is our province. I want to thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you.
Sounding victory and a happy crowd in Etobicoke tonight. That is Ontario Premier Doug Ford. It's a massive majority government for the Ontario PC Party. 81 seats. The New Democrats forming the official opposition. A terrible night for the Liberals all around. And a big upset that we'll tell you about coming up next. The latest results and the winner from Glengarry Prescott Russell. This is Ontario Votes on City News.
We'll return with more results from your riding and across the province on City News.
Riding requires attention and focus. No distractions, no moment of unawareness, because one brief moment can cost a lifetime of other moments. Everyone deserves to arrive home.
The Maritime provinces are home to some of the oldest settlements in Canadian history. But did you know that one of the first was actually started by Black settlers? Take a minute to learn about the rise and untimely fall of Africville. Black people have lived in Nova Scotia since before the founding of Halifax in 1749, but it wasn't until after the American Revolution in the late 1700s and early 1800s that large groups of Black settlers began to arrive in the province, many of whom were former slaves promised freedom and land in Nova Scotia. What they encountered when they arrived, however, was racist treatment by their white neighbors and government officials. This pushed many Black people to build homes on the outskirts of town instead. But despite the area receiving little support from government officials and lacking necessities like functioning sewage systems, access to clean water, and proper garbage disposals, the tight-knit community persevered, and so Africville was born. For more than 150 years, the small community grew, expanding from just a few homes to a population of over 400 people. Everything changed, however, in 1964 when plans for a new bridge and the idea of urban renewal prompted the municipality to set its sights on Africville's land. Instead of investing in the community, officials approved a relocation program that promised free job training and employment assistance to help residents through relocation. But the reality wasn't so kind. Residents had their belongings moved in city dump trucks and homes were demolished immediately
Ontario
after
Votes 2022.
400+ people living in Africville, and only 14.
Let's get right to our next guest, who will be the next MPP for Glengarry Prescott Russell, representing the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, Stéphane Sarrazin. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How did you and your campaign team pull this off?
Well, we worked hard. We went to knock at every door possible. We went to meet the people, and on top of that, I mean, people know that we will be working hard for them, and they wanted to give another 4 years to Doug Ford, and there we are.
Derek Fage here. Stéphane, congratulations from myself as well. This has, been very interesting to follow. This particular riding, Stéphane, with Amanda Simard now running as a Liberal candidate, previously voted into office under the PC banner, as you know, and she left the party after the PCs made cuts to French language services. You yourself being a French Canadian, I just wonder, when you look at that, those French language services, what did you hear from constituents when you went door to door talking to them, and was this something that was brought up?
Well, like French services is really important, but there's a lot more files, like cost of living was the main concern when we knock at doors, and, Doug Ford priorities, was like to bring down the cost of living for the people, the work for the worker, invest in infrastructure, and I think, people kind of agreed with our Prime Minister.
Sam LaPrade.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and once again, congratulations. As we, try to work with all of the different parties moving forward, are you willing to listen to the NDPs and really what they're hoping to get accomplished in this time at Queen's Park as well?
Well, we're going to work for our people, and we're going to do our best to represent Glengarry Prescott Russell, and we want to be a strong voice, something that was probably missing for the last 4 years.
Okay. And you are going to remain a progressive conservative for the next 4 years, Mr. Sarrazin.
Absolutely. I've got no plans. We can work together. We can work as a team. And, when something comes up, we go back to the drawing board, and, it's all about teamwork.
Okay. So what will happen with your position as mayor of Alfred Plantagenet? You are the mayor of Alfred Plantagenet. What's your status with that position?
I already have a replacement right now for my campaign. I stepped down about 30 days ago on May the 1st, and I'm glad I'll be able to represent all the municipalities of Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, and Toronto, and I'll still be in with all these guys, with all the mayors, all 9 municipalities, and we'll work together and we'll make things happen.
Mr. Sarrazin, félicitations.
Thank you very
much. Congratulations. So that's an interesting race. It did go for the Progressive Conservatives 4 years ago, but then, as Derek mentioned, Franco-Ontarian issues once again took over that riding and upset the MPP, Amanda Simard, sat as an independent for a while, then slowly kind of made her way across the floor and joined the Liberals, only to go down to defeat.
Which is fascinating,
in
right?
GPR. Yeah, it's quite the end of what has been a real soap opera. Okay, let's, Andrea Horvath is making her concession speech. Many wondering what is ahead for her political future. This is her fourth election. This is the NDP leader, Andrea Horvath.
Their voices heard in this election. They actually made their voices heard. To every Ontarian, regardless of who you voted for, thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about the province and our future. I'd like to take a minute to thank Stephen Del Duca, Mike Schreiner, and Doug Ford for representing their parties well. Everyone who puts their name on a ballot is stepping up and making our democracy stronger. There's no doubt about it. But you're probably not surprised to know that I could not be more proud of the vision that we put before Ontario, we put a vision forward of a province where everyone can get the health care that they need when they need it, close to home. A strong, universal healthcare system without painful waits and hallway medicine, where we respect and value our incredible healthcare heroes. Let's give it up for our healthcare heroes. And not only where we respect them, but where we have their back, like they always have our backs. That's how much we have to respect our frontline healthcare workers. Where we have affordable dental care for every Ontarian, mental health and pharmacare into OHIP, seniors care that puts support and respect for our loved ones ahead of corporate profits. The top-notch public education our kids deserve in good schools with enough caring adults. A plan to tackle the crises in housing and affordability, get wages up and rents down. A new way forward where we respect and fulfill the treaties. Working shoulder to shoulder with Indigenous people to fix what's broken, from clean water to livable housing. Urgently tackling the climate crisis, urgently tackling the climate crisis. Doing our part to ensure that the next 7 generations have a healthy planet and a bright future, full of opportunity. And doing so much more to build a province without hate, bigotry, or discrimination of any kind. We will never stop fighting to make these goals a reality for people in Ontario. In every corner of this province, people are counting on us to be on their side. And I know, without a doubt, the team of New Democrats elected tonight will work hard every single day for you. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's true. New Democrats will always stand up for everyday working families. Always. For every person who needs support from their government. For every Ontarian trying to build a better life for themselves and their family. Everyone trying to build a stronger foundation and a brighter future for the next generation. Tonight the people have spoken, and they've sent a very clear message. The majority of Ontarians have not endorsed or supported the Conservative government. And I just want to say that Doug Ford needs to realize that. He needs to understand that Ontarians did not vote for more cuts and privatization of the things that matter the most to all of us. Ontarians did not vote for more painful waits and more hallway medicine, more horrific mistreatment of our loved ones in seniors' care, or for more of our kids' schools to crumble into disrepair. That's not what Ontarians voted for. They did not vote for more of their friends and neighbors to slip through the cracks, to struggle and scrape by, living paycheck to paycheck, or slip into poverty. They didn't vote for an even less affordable province, where the hope of buying a home or even renting a decent place you can afford becomes more and more of a pipe dream. The majority of Ontarians did not vote for big highways to big houses that no one can afford. They didn't vote for our most vulnerable to be trapped in legislated poverty. They did not vote for a government that ignores its treaty obligations or ignores the rising tide of hate, division, and violence targeting so many communities in our province. And they didn't vote for a government that ignores science, carves up the greenbelt, and makes the climate crisis worse instead of better. And you know what? These are the worries that people have shared with me throughout the years. And that's why I have fought so hard for them. Respecting the voters means listening to all that they tell us. And this is something I want to remind Mr. Ford about, that respecting the voters is about listening to all of what they tell us. So I'm going to save my final thanks for my family, my friends, and the people of Hamilton. And I'm going to keep working to earn your confidence each and every day. I'm going to keep doing that. But tonight, it's time for me to pass the torch, to pass the baton, to hand off the leadership of the NDP. And you know what? It makes me sad, but it makes me happy because our team is so strong right now. Tissue, and my grandma would have normally tucked it under her sleeve, but my sleeve's too loose, and so I had to tuck it into my belt. But I'm not shedding tears of sadness. I'm shedding tears of pride. Look at you. Look at all of you. Look at what we have done together. Look at what we have done together. Honestly, together, my friends, we have built
clearly not the outcome that Andrea Horwath had been hoping for. A very emotional leader of the Ontario New Democrats, Sam, who says it is time to pass the torch.
No surprise there at all, Rob. We talked a little bit earlier as we were preparing for tonight, and if she certainly didn't get it done tonight, and we've said it time and time again, she just wasn't going to get a fifth try.
Yeah, but I have interviewed Andrea Horwath dozens of times over my career. She's been involved in politics for, I believe, 13 years now. I know a lot was made that this is her fourth election. The last election was probably the NDP's best chance. There was no way she was going to get a fifth chance. I always appreciated how Andrea Horwath conducted herself in politics. Very passionate about our politics are not aligned, but passionate about the causes that she believed in, Derek. So.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think she kind of went off character a bit in this particular campaign with, a lot of attacks, which I don't think, that's not something we've necessarily been used to in the past. I thought she'd maybe wait a couple of days to make this announcement. Sam mentioning she wasn't surprised. I was a little bit surprised. I thought maybe she'd wait a couple of days, but she did the right thing for the party. That's for sure.
Okay, that's the New Democrat leader, Andrea Horwath. Disappointing night for the New Democrats, although they will remain the official opposition but lose seats on this night, primarily to the Progressive Conservatives. It's a 27-seat result right now. For the Progressive Conservatives, or for the New Democrats, pardon me. That's a loss of 13 seats compared to 4 years ago. The PCs pick up 3 seats. The Liberals pick up 1, but do not maintain official party status, do not achieve official party status, just 8 seats. And Stephen Del Duca, we're waiting to hear from Stephen Del Duca, the Liberal leader, learn a little bit more about his future, given that he failed to secure victory in his riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. Do you want to stop? Shall we stop? We'll stop. Sorry, Sam.
No, I was just going to say, it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you, if we come back and Stephen Del Duca has a very similar speech to Andrea tonight and really says, listen, this has been, an interesting race. I have, given it my all, but it's time for a fresh perspective.
Okay, so when we come back, we do expect to hear the concession speech from Stephen Del Duca, the Ontario Liberal leader. And we'll get some closing thoughts from our political communications expert, the great Barry McLaughlin is going to join us as well. Coming up, Rob Snow Show, Ontario Votes. This is City News.
City News, Ontario.
2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Today is a very exciting day. We are officially opening the Interzip Rogers for the summer season of this year. Last year we were expecting to have maybe 20,000 people, and we actually had over 30,000 riders for the first year. So we're really excited to reopen this year.
That was epic and scary!
You have a really different perspective view-wise of the area we're in. So you have a clear view of the Parliament. Obviously, you're crossing the river, and of course, you're moving from a province to another, which is unique of this zip line. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Rogers has been partners even before Interzip opened, actually. They were all in the first meeting we had with Rogers, and that for us was really a nice commitment. We're really fortunate to have Rogers with us, and on top of having Rogers, it's basically the name of the zipline, which is the Interzip Rogers, that is now pretty much renowned across the country.
Rogers Interzip is a great activity for people who live in or visit the National Capital Region. Get out and have an opportunity to zip across the Ottawa River between Ottawa and Outaouais.
In the late 70s, our family continued to help the citizens of Ottawa.
Ontario Votes 2022 continues on City News 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Stephen Del Duca, not the kind of night he wanted, lost in his own riding, and the Liberals have gained one seat but will not achieve official party status. He is making his speech now in Vaughan Woodbridge.
Yes, all of our candidates, every single candidate. Our Ontario Liberal Party, our Ontario Liberal family has come so very far so fast, and during a pandemic no less. You think about this for just a moment. We had a diverse and inclusive roster of candidates with, for the first time ever in our party's history, 50% of our candidates being female. Absolutely, absolutely. And so many of our candidates, so many of them determined, because as being younger candidates, so determined to help shape Ontario's future. Now, to be clear, this isn't the outcome that we had hoped for and worked hard for. And yes, it's true, I am disappointed to not have been successful here in my home community, my home riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. But I am very, very proud of all of our MPPs, both those caucus members who will be returning to the legislature and our newly elected MPPs. I'm proud of the innovative ideas that we as a team brought forward. Proud of every one of you who fundraised, knocked on doors, made those phone calls, put up signs, and today got out the vote. I want to thank our riding association presidents. I know many of you have heard me say this before. Many years ago, before I first became an MPP, I had the chance to serve as a riding association president. I had the chance to serve as a campus club president and to serve on multiple riding executives. And so, to the women and men who make up the rank and file, if I can put it that way, of our party. Yes, our PLA presidents, including my own, Christina Sindrick. Thank you so much, Christina. To our riding association presidents and executives, to our Ontario Young Liberals, to our Ontario Women's Liberal Commission, and to Brian Johns, our party president, and the entire Ontario Liberal Party Executive Council, thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say again, I have no doubt that the women and men that Ontario Liberals have elected to the legislature will do their part. In fact, will do more than their part to help grow a new and energetic progressive movement here in Ontario. It will, however, be a movement that will be led by a new leader. Earlier this evening, I informed our party president of my decision to step down from the leadership of our party, and I have asked him to meet with the executive to set a leadership contest for as soon as is reasonable. I am again so very proud of the work that we did. And here is something else that I know. Watching how we've grown, watching how we've grown stronger, watching how we've worked so hard to build this party over the last couple of years, I know that we as a political family and we as a political movement will be starting the next campaign from a much better place. In addition to the new MPPs that we've added, we've attracted, think about this, we've attracted tens of thousands of new volunteers and party members to take up the fight. And we anticipate that the party will be debt-free by the end of this year. By the end of this year. But more importantly, I know that Ontario Liberals will use our new, stronger platform to continue to propose thoughtful, innovative, progressive ideas to make our province a place to grow. Today, the voters of our province have spoken, and they've delivered a majority government to the Conservatives. I want to congratulate Premier Ford, and I hope he leads our province well. Now, I say that, and I mean that sincerely, because above all else, I'm a dad. I'm a dad to Talia and Grace, who are sitting right here. And And I want my daughters to grow up in a province, an incredible opportunity, an incredible Ontario that offers them even more opportunity than I had growing up here. I trust that the incredible responsibility of leading this great province will weigh heavily on Mr. Ford. I know that it would for me, because after all, it is a big deal. It's a big deal to be entrusted with the hopes and dreams of millions of people. And as a party, I know that we will redouble our efforts to earn your trust, because we don't care where you came from, how long you've been here, who you're connected to, or how much money you have, or what your station in life is. We care that you feel respected. We care that you feel included. We care that you feel seen. And we'll look right past the neighborhood that you live in, rich or poor, rural or urban, north or south, to make sure that you get your chance to succeed. That's what Ontario Liberals believe in. That's the Ontario that we will always fight for. And you know that we will do this, because what's important to us is pretty simple. We want the best for you, the best education, the best health care, the best quality of life, all supported by the best jobs and the strongest economy, and we won't ever stop working to make that happen. Now, the last thing that I want to say as I wrap up is that there are a lot of people, and I can see so many of you as I stand here at this podium, and I know that you in this room represent thousands of others right across Ontario. Now, the women and men who never stand at a podium and never see their names in the paper, but I and every single one of our candidates, well, we stand on your shoulders. But there are three names that are most important to me of all: Utilia, Talia, and Grace, my wife and our daughters. You should see the look on their faces right now. My wife and our two daughters, who I love so, so much, who've inspired me, who've motivated me and supported me every single step of the way. And I can confirm that we've already agreed that we'll be at Wonderland this Sunday, right, guys? Now, they're the reason. They're the reason that I do this. They're the reason that I do everything. They're the reason that I've always been able to do what I've tried hard to do. Now, there's some other people that I want to thank as well. They're not in the room right now, but they are upstairs. And those are my parents, Margaret and Benny. Yes, please. My mom and dad, I've said this so many times, they literally moved heaven and earth for me, and for my sister Lorraine, and for my brothers Mark and Michael. They did everything for us, sacrificed, so dedicated, so hardworking. They still are. I want to say, Mom, Dad, I love you so much, and I am so grateful for everything that you've always done for me. Thank you. And I also want to thank a number of the people who've worked so hard. I'm looking out at an audience of people who I know have been knocking on doors here in Vaughan, Woodbridge, led by Andrew Donaghy, our local campaign manager. Andrew, thank you so much. And honestly, if I start naming all of the names of people who've worked hard over the past 4 weeks, and in some cases like Rocco Grossi over the past 30 years with me, that's Rocco Grossi, by the way, Rocco Grossi. But I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for being with me every step of the way. You know, this has been an incredible journey for me in this party, in this political family that I love so much. And as I said earlier in my remarks this evening, I know that we will go forward. I know that we will never stop working. I know that we will continue to grow and to be a force for good, a force for positive change here in Ontario. It is what Ontario Liberals do. It is what we do well. It is what we should continue to do, and again, I know we will. And I just want to say, having had the chance over the past couple of years to serve as your leader, has been the honor of my lifetime. I want to thank you. I want to thank all Ontario Liberal Party members for giving me this chance, for working alongside me, and for making sure that we always put our best foot forward. So, thank you for this. Thank you for your incredible work. Thank you for always being there for me and for each other. And I look forward to doing whatever I can to continue to support our party and build an Ontario that is always a place to grow. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate it.
A crushing defeat for Stephen Del Duca, the Ontario Liberal leader, who loses in his home riding to Michael Tibolo. The incumbent Progressive Conservative is re-elected in Vaughan Woodbridge, and the Ontario Liberal Party wins 8 seats, does not achieve, for the second election in a row, does not achieve official party status. So here's what we're going to do. Overtime. We're going to do some overtime. An extra half hour. We've all agreed we'll do an extra half hour because what we want to do, one of the amazing things is Ottawa West Nepean, on a night when Doug Ford's Ontario PC party wins 83 seats and Ottawa West Nepean has been a bellwether, well, that streak has been broken tonight with a stunning victory by Chandra Pasma. Came so close 4 years ago, victorious tonight over Jeremy Roberts of the Progressive Conservatives. So the victor will join us from the New Democrats, Chandra Pasma, right after the 11 o'clock news, and Barry McLaughlin shares some closing thoughts on this election night, as will my colleagues here at City News, Rogers Television, Derek Fage, Sam LaPrade. This is Ontario Votes, and this is City News.
City News, Ontario.